review it right now in an instant audit with Ron Davari, who's the founder and CEO of NewOak Capital. Good to have you, as always, Ron. Good morning. The politics of this remain to be seen, how it's going to play out, if there's a filibuster, if it passes, and everything else. From what you've seen, though, the Wall Street view, is this going to be too punitive, the right balance? What do you make of what Dodd is proposing?
I think overall, I think there's some pretty good elements of it in terms of creating the exchange agency, if you will, for derivatives. I think that would actually create something Wall Street wanted to have to make sure that the counterparty risk is not as much, and that's positive. And that allows essentially being able to take somebody Lehman out without bringing the grid down.
Right.
So being able to go in there, that's obviously a positive thing to have. And I think having also a agency to be able to look at such a failure and be able to allow it to go down, I think ultimately
so
would...
Systemic risk.
Systemic risk
and the
is
resolution
good.
fund
exactly.
You like as well.
Yeah, the resolution authority. But I think the part that is obviously controversial is the consumer protection role for the Fed.
What do you think, though, overall about the Federal Reserve getting more power, the exact opposite of what we thought going into this bill?
My personal feeling is that this is almost somewhat inconsistent with their other role, meaning that protecting but in a way, they have to do it from a standpoint of the health of the banks.
So you're saying the monetary policy side really is related to the supervision of the banks?
Because if you look at it, if they hadn't done all the bad lending, we wouldn't be where we are, and they wouldn't have to save them. But there's a question whether there should be somebody else at a micro level. And this is too much of, I think, micro activity than actually going after the.
To put on the political hat for a little bit, I mean, what do you think the odds of passage here are? Because, again, we're getting caught up in arguing who should have power over what, who should be regulating what, as opposed to the content of it, which is much more important long term. I think most people agree. Do you have a resolution authority in there? Do you have these things that people have called for since the crisis in there? Not who is going to be in charge of what in terms of consumer protection and everything else. Will it be held up because of that, do you think?
I think this whole package is a good compromise. At the end, given a good timetable, they're going to be able to get there. But the problem is they're trying to jam it.
Yeah, he's doing it alone.
And trying to jam it is not going to be very helpful, and that's what's going to be what people are going to be watching.
All righty, Ron. Good to see you. We'll be back later on in the hour. Let's talk to Ron Davari about it. He's here for an instant audit, founder and CEO of NewOak Capital. U.S. or U.K.? Is it the U.K. that should be more worried, or is that is that just thinking too highly of ourselves? Should we be concerned as well about AAA ratings right now?
Maybe the too big to fail kind of a guy. Everything is relative. At the end of the day, I think the concerns here is that the rating agencies will talk and put us, let's say, under watch, but they would never take an action.
I asked that because we're the reserve currency.
Yeah, we are.
Yeah, but wait a second here.
Sure.
We're going to go back to Moody's, these same rating companies that missed the whole debt crisis, and trust them for our own sovereign debt ratings. I mean, tie this story into what we're seeing about financial regulation reform and what we might hear about that today, because these rating companies, we haven't seen a whole lot of changes here.
Not only that, we regulate the entity that rates us. That doesn't really work that well. There's a bit of a conflict right there. But the reality is that the ratings are essentially written into our laws, written in the way we allocate capital. So we can't take the ratings, even though we may distrust them, we can't take them out. So rating agencies are important, but the reality is that the market is already very smart about it. China already a year ago have said, we're not sure whether the U.S. is going to pay back our money. And that's a big, So
but is that more damaging than getting a ratings drop?
I think so. If China pulls out of the U.S., we'll be in trouble.
But if they actually do it, if they're
not going to worry about the rating as much. They're going to worry about the reality of whether we can support and service our debt. There's a big difference between the 80s and now. At that time, the interest rates were above 10%. So we could essentially lower. We had a huge amount of control. We could lower the rate and reduce our debt load. But now, at 1%, we can't do a whole lot.
It can't come much lower than zero. Can't come much lower than zero, right?
Even at zero, we are 15% of our our total budget. If so, if we can't really control that, then we have to cut our budget, which is not really
and that's the thing.
politicians are not about to do.
And that's where we don't have this. The editorial in the Financial Times this morning that was written by the Shadow Chancellor over in Great Britain, as well as Jeffrey Sachs from Columbia, that talks about being more frugal for all countries with their budget deficits. And the idea of the United States, even if we can keep floating our own debt, the Chinese continue to finance it, and we have the reserve currency and all these things, do you think we have a plan? Because we need a plan, don't we? Even if we're just going to keep spending for now, we need a 5-year plan or
here's
something.
the dichotomy of all this. We have to go spend a lot more. And that's how we get out of this, not actually pulling back. And that's a little bit funny here, because right now the only group of people who can actually go out and spend is the government to get out.
So what's the timing, though? There's a point where that cuts off and you change strategy. What is it?
I think that's correct. We have to worry about this 3 years from now, not now.
3 years.
But once the engine of the economy goes, then we pull back the government.
Do we see this rating drop? Do we see it cut?
No, I don't think so.
Never lose the AAA.
I can bet on my whole house today.
Well, he lives in a pretty nice place, too, by the way.
And we know how people betting on their houses have gone in recent years. I don't know if that counts for as much
as the only thing I would do.
As it used to, right? Thank you, Ron. All right, anyway.